Selfishness has become almost a slur. Think of yourself and you get condemned. Choose yourself and you get guilt-tripped. Living for others is virtue. Living for yourself is shameful. Society whispers the same message on repeat. Others first. Their expectations, their needs, their comfort. You come last. Or, better yet, not at all. Machiavelli stops right here and says something that stings precisely because it's true. The person who doesn't choose themselves gets chosen by others, and that choice almost never works in their favor. Because the people who choose you aren't there out of love. They're there because you're useful. The moment the work is done, the role is filled, the resource runs dry, the choice gets reversed, and the one left standing alone, every single time, is you. Machiavelli wasn't interested in morality. He wasn't asking whether you were a good person or a bad one. He was asking something colder. Who survives and why? His answer comes down to one uncomfortable truth about human nature. People don't remember sacrifice for long, but they label the one who makes it almost instantly. Weak, available, useful. The person who gives constantly stops being valued. They become expected. The person who always understands stops being appreciated. They become assumed. The person who keeps stepping back eventually stops being seen altogether. Machiavelli's real warning is this: the more you retreat, the more the world pushes you, not forward but sideways. What most people miss is that refusing to live for yourself isn't neutrality. It's taking sides, just not your own. You end up serving other people's plans, their timelines, their priorities. And this gets dressed up in the language of kindness, maturity, understanding. But the outcome doesn't change. Your life stops belonging to you. The person who doesn't choose themselves gets spent. No one in the world thinks about you as much as you think about yourself. That sentence is hard to sit with. But until a person genuinely accepts it, they'll keep walking into the same wall, approaching the world with good intentions and leaving with the same disappointment every time. Because most people aren't interested in who you are. They're interested in what you do for them, what you offer, how easily you adapt, how quietly you stay. They'll praise you, call you selfless, call you generous, call you emotionally mature. But that praise isn't protection. It's an incentive. It keeps the supply coming. When the supply dries up, they move on. And when they turn their backs, it feels like betrayal. But Machiavelli would say that's not betrayal. That's nature. People organize themselves around self-interest. Denying that doesn't make you noble. It just makes you a slower learner. The person who never chooses themselves carries everyone's weight, rushes to every fire, puts every other need above their own. Then, when it's finally their turn, no one shows up, because everyone assumed they'd always be there. It never occurred to anyone that they could get tired. Genuine goodwill, when it becomes routine, stops being noticed. It becomes wallpaper. The person who always says yes, always understands, always makes room. They don't get celebrated for it. They get used for it. And after a while, they stop being visible entirely. Not because they disappeared, but because they were always there. Machiavelli identifies the precise mistake. People confuse being good with being invisible. They treat silence as virtue, endurance as strength, but that posture doesn't earn respect. It slowly erases you. You become valueless, not from neglect but from overexposure. Choosing yourself isn't selfishness. It isn't ego. It certainly isn't cruelty. Choosing yourself is drawing a line, saying I exist too, I have a direction, I have priorities. The person who can't say those things ends up as a supporting character in someone else's story, standing at the edge of the frame, never at the center. And nobody remembers the supporting characters. The person who doesn't choose themselves lives under a permanent psychology of debt, always owing something to someone. Time, energy, attention, presence. They believe that if they keep paying, they'll eventually be free. They won't. A person without limits has limitless debt. Machiavelli is unambiguous about what happens next. If you don't make the choice, the world makes it for you. It decides when you're tired, when you go quiet, how much you give, how long you last. And those decisions are never made with your interests in mind. Because the world isn't managing your life. It's managing its own order. Choosing yourself also means accepting this. Not everyone will like you. Not everyone will approve. Not everyone will celebrate your growth. But without paying that price, you can't build a real position. Because respect isn't earned by being universally liked. It's earned by being consistently clear. Sacrifice is not power. It's a transaction. Sacrifice gets told as pure virtue. Society applauds it. Families teach it. Cultures sanctify it. The person who gives is elevated. The person who steps aside is called mature. Machiavelli stands directly against all of this. Not because he's cynical, but because he's honest. He isn't interested in how people should behave. He's interested in how they actually do. And the truth is, sacrifice is rarely innocent. Most of the time, it's a hidden transaction. When someone sacrifices, they're almost always, often without realizing it, expecting something back. Recognition, gratitude, the hope that when their moment comes, someone will show up for them. They don't say any of this out loud. That would ruin the performance. Because sacrifice, the story goes, must be unconditional. And that's precisely where the problem starts. When nothing comes back, the disappointment hits hard. The giver remembers everything they gave. The other person has long since stopped thinking about it, because people don't notice what they receive. They only notice when it stops. Once sacrifice becomes consistent, it stops being a gift and becomes a given, the standard. And standards don't generate gratitude. They generate expectation. According to Machiavelli, the real trap is this. People sacrifice in order to feel good about themselves and end up resenting themselves. Why is it always me? Why does no one think of me? But that anger doesn't go outward. It turns inward. Because somewhere they know the truth. No one forced them into this. They walked in freely. Strong people don't play this game. Strong people don't trade in their emotions. Before they give, they ask a simple question. What does this cost me? Time, energy, dignity, position. Asking that question isn't cold. It's honest. Machiavelli's view is that unmanaged generosity is genuinely dangerous, not because giving is bad, but because giving without limits trains the other person to feel none. People test the edges. They ask for more. They start treating more as normal. And the day you finally stop, they act as if you've done something wrong. If you'd set limits from the beginning, none of it would have gotten that far. When you start living for yourself, giving stops being an automatic reflex. Saying yes to everyone stops being compulsory. Helping becomes a decision rather than a default, and it carries entirely different weight. You choose when to give. You choose when to pull back. That control changes everything about how you carry yourself. For Machiavelli, power begins exactly there, not in boundless generosity, but in selective presence. What isn't available to everyone holds value. What can't be accessed at any moment gets taken seriously. The powerful person isn't the one who gives constantly. It's the one who knows precisely when to give. Sacrifice isn't power because in sacrifice, you're not in control. Habit drives you. Guilt drives you. The need to be seen as a good person drives you. But power, for Machiavelli, isn't rooted in need. It's rooted in will. Where will is present, even sacrifice becomes an act of strength. Where it isn't, sacrifice consumes you. At some point, the person who's been sacrificing for years realizes they thought they were building connection through what they gave. The other person was just getting comfortable. They felt at ease while you were there. When you pulled back, they didn't feel loss. They went looking for a new source. That realization is heavy, but it's instructive. Machiavelli puts it plainly. When you begin to live for yourself, some people will fall away. Because they didn't love you, they loved what they could take from you. And that falling away isn't a loss, it's a purge, because strength means being able to stay with the people who actually want to see you. Sacrifice is valuable when it's chosen. It's exploitable when it's obligatory. For Machiavelli, the question was never about whether to give. It was always about who controls the giving. When you choose to live for yourself, sacrifice stops being your identity. You become the one who defines it, and that reversal changes everything. No one gets to assume your goodness anymore. No one gets to expect it on autopilot. Respect starts there. Power isn't gained through sacrifice. It's gained through the ability to manage sacrifice. That's Machiavelli's lesson. Harsh but protective. The person who hesitates is condemned to someone else's pace. Hesitation is weakness in its quietest, most destructive form. It doesn't announce itself. It wears the mask of thoughtfulness. It passes itself off as depth, as empathy, as moral seriousness. But for Machiavelli, hesitation is just decision avoidance with better branding, and the person who avoids decisions doesn't stay neutral. They surrender to everyone else's. While you're deliberating, someone else advances. While you're weighing options, someone else takes the ground. While you're waiting to be certain, someone else sets the direction. And when you find yourself drifting along inside that direction, you call it fate. Machiavelli calls it avoidable. The more someone hesitates, the more they adapt to others' rhythms. Their own tempo disappears. Character gets worn down gradually because they stop asking what they want and start asking what's expected of them. At that point, a person stops being an agent and becomes a reactor. Not someone who makes moves, but someone who responds to them. Not at the center of their own life, but orbiting its edges. And the person orbiting the edges doesn't set direction, they get directed. Hesitation is also invisible surrender. Nobody's been told yes, nobody's been told no, but Machiavelli knows that the person who can never say no will eventually be made to say yes to someone else's plan, on someone else's terms. Living for yourself demands speed, not perfection, decisiveness. It means accepting the risk of being wrong, because a wrong decision can be corrected. Prolonged indecision just hollows you out. The person trying to please everyone stalls at every turn, because every choice risks an objection. Every move risks a disappointment. So, decisions get delayed. Confidence shrinks, and as confidence shrinks, hesitation compounds. The person who chooses themselves breaks that loop. They accept that some decisions won't be popular. They know not everyone will approve. But they move anyway, and that momentum lightens them. Because they stop spending energy on internal negotiation and start spending it on actual progress. The decisive person is tired less often. The hesitant person exhausts themselves before anything has even happened. For Machiavelli, that's losing the war before the battle starts. Indecision often gets framed as moral superiority. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to be unfair. But Machiavelli cuts through it. Everyone has interests. Your hesitation becomes someone else's advantage, and that advantage gets used against you. Living for yourself doesn't mean acting recklessly. It means refusing to hide behind endless deliberation. It means tolerating uncertainty. It means risking being misunderstood. Standing alone. Because for Machiavelli, mental speed is just as much a form of power as physical strength. The person who decides quickly isn't always right, but they're always in play. And the person in play shapes things. The person who shapes things rarely gets crushed. The hesitant person watches the game, tries to decode other people's moves, and eventually, when it's all over, they tell themselves, this is just how it was meant to go. That's a consolation sentence. The truth is that at some earlier moment, a different path was possible, and the window closed while they were still thinking. For Machiavelli, hesitation is a strategic problem, not a moral one. The person who can't solve it will always be running at someone else's speed, no matter how good their intentions are. The person who chooses themselves builds their own pace, and that pace, quiet, self-determined, unshakable, is one of the most powerful things a person can possess. The person who's good for everyone is strong for no one. At first glance, getting along with everyone looks like a virtue. It earns you labels: easygoing, mature, gracious. But Machiavelli flips the question. Is this person actually powerful? Or are they just someone nobody bothers to challenge? The fundamental problem with being universally accommodating is that you're equally close to everyone, and when you're equidistant from everyone, everyone feels entitled to test you. There's no special boundary for anyone, no closed door for anyone. And so, people learn gradually that you can be asked of, you can be loaded with things, you'll give ground. No distance means no limits. No limits means violation starts, and violation rarely arrives as a direct assault. It comes in the form of small requests, casual expectations, favors framed as no big deal. The person who's good for everyone can't refuse these things, because refusing would crack the image they've spent so long building. For Machiavelli, power is the capacity to say no. The person who says yes to everything isn't strong, they're predictable. And predictable people get managed. Others stop measuring their limits and start measuring their patience, knowing eventually they'll get what they want. When patience stands in for limits, authority dissolves. When you start living for yourself, this shifts. You stop being convenient for everyone. You turn down certain requests. You don't respond to certain expectations. You put distance between yourself and certain people. That creates friction. And a lot of people interpret that friction as a sign that something's wrong with you. It isn't. It's a sign that the people who were benefiting from your openness no longer can. Many people retreat at this point because the sting of being disliked is real. The fear of exclusion is powerful. But Machiavelli is clear. Strong people don't aim to be loved. They aim to be taken seriously. Love is conditional. It reroots when interests change. Seriousness is durable. Even people who don't like you will respect a clear boundary. Seriousness isn't built by being warm to everyone. It's built by having a discernible position, knowing what you accept, what you won't, where you stand. That clarity pushes some people away, but those who stay become noticeably more careful. The universally accommodating person is also the most exposed in a crisis. Crisis moments demand sides. There's no decision that satisfies everyone, and since this person has spent years adapting to whoever was in front of them, nobody can actually predict them when the pressure is real. People wonder, whose side are they on? For Machiavelli, that's the most dangerous place to be. Not enemy, not ally, just expendable. Crises don't tolerate ambiguity. They demand clarity. The person who lives for themselves already has that clarity. They were never everyone's friend to begin with. Their positions are legible, and legibility in a crisis is an asset. People may disagree with you, but if they know where you stand, they think twice. Power isn't built by making everyone happy. It's built by being willing to make some people unhappy. That's Machiavelli's most uncomfortable lesson, and also his most protective one. The person chasing universal approval depletes themselves. The person who lives selectively builds something real, because selectivity, quiet and understated, is one of the most solid forms of power there is. Don't make the goal to get along with everyone. Make it to see clearly. Who respects your limits? Who retreats the moment you stop being endlessly available? And who, after all of that, is still there? For Machiavelli, real power reveals itself in exactly that moment. The moment you stop being good for everyone, you find out who actually values you. The person who won't save themselves can't save anyone. The impulse to rescue others looks noble. Society rewards it. Morality enshrines it. Entire personal mythologies are built around it. But Machiavelli strips away the romance and states what should be obvious. You can't hold someone else up when you can't hold yourself up. The person who lives perpetually for others loses their center by degrees. They forget what they want. They suppress what they feel. They stop noticing their own exhaustion because there's always someone else who needs more right now. The cycle doesn't announce itself. It just quietly uses you up. The depleted person ends up at one of two exits. They either break, becoming quietly resentful, convinced they gave everything and received nothing, internalizing an anger they never express. Or they harden, turning old generosity into leverage, using past kindness as a form of pressure, helping in ways that are really just control in disguise. Either way, the person who tried to save the world ends up producing a different kind of damage. Machiavelli's point is that this outcome is structurally inevitable when someone hasn't established their own center first. Help given from an empty place is indebted help. It always wants something back, even when the person giving it has convinced themselves otherwise. Living for yourself at this level isn't selfishness, It's a prerequisite. It means standing on your own feet before you offer a hand to anyone else. Carrying your own emotional weight, setting your own direction, drawing your own limits. Everything given before that work is done comes with invisible strings. There's another trap Machiavelli identified. People become addicted to the rescuer role. Being needed starts to feel like identity. Purpose gets tangled up with indispensability, and when that role goes away, when the person they were helping no longer needs them or stops responding or moves on, they're left facing a void. That's partly why the person who can't save themselves clings so hard to saving others. It fills the space where a self should be. But when you live from your own center, that equation changes. Helping stops being how you know who you are. You already know, which means it becomes a genuine choice rather than a compulsion. And help freely chosen carries a completely different quality. No hidden expectations, no need for validation, no quiet accounting of what you're owed. The person who has found their own center also understands something crucial. Not everyone wants to be saved. Not everyone deserves it. And not everyone is your responsibility. That's not coldness, it's discernment. It means your energy goes where it can actually do something. Saving yourself also means accepting your own limits. You tire, you break, you are finite. That acceptance doesn't weaken you, it makes you realistic. Realistic people make fewer mistakes, burn out less often, and last longer. For Machiavelli, the real danger isn't goodwill. It's goodwill without structure. The person who believes they'll gain power through self-sacrifice eventually loses all of it. Because nobody respects someone who consistently treats themselves as expendable, not for long. So, build yourself first. Find your own order. Set your limits. Know your direction. The help you give afterward is cleaner, stronger, and more effective because you're no longer trying to prop others up while you yourself are sinking. You're someone who has the ground under their feet and can therefore actually offer something real. Machiavelli's lesson: living for yourself isn't exclusion. It's preservation, and only the person who has preserved themselves is genuinely capable of being useful. Giving comes from surplus, not from depletion. The person without selfishness is open to manipulation. The person who refuses to be selfish tends to think of themselves as the more evolved one, more empathetic, more principled, simply a better human being. Machiavelli doesn't let that flattery stand. He points to what it actually produces. Goodwill without limits isn't virtue, it's vulnerability. And vulnerability, sooner or later, gets filled, usually by someone else's agenda. The person allergic to selfishness can't say no without it costing them something internally. No triggers guilt. They worry about the other person's reaction. They don't want to be the one who caused disappointment. And right in that gap, manipulation finds its opening. It doesn't need to be dramatic. No threats, no overt pressure, just a quiet sigh, a flicker of disappointment, a well-timed remark. I wouldn't have done it that way. You've changed. You used to be easier to talk to. These lines aren't arguments, they're accusations. Their purpose is to load guilt, not to reason. And the person who can't be selfish picks that guilt right up, because their identity as a good person suddenly feels at stake. Machiavelli's observation is sharp here. The most dangerous manipulators aren't the aggressive ones. They're the ones who play the victim flawlessly. They appear fragile, appear overwhelmed, appear to need rescuing, while quietly steering every situation in their direction. They've clocked that the person across from them can't set limits. That's all the opening they need. The person with no limits is governable, through emotion, through conscience, through the unspoken rules of social expectation. You're strong. This is nothing for you. If not you, then who? The person on the receiving end of these lines doesn't usually notice the machinery. They just find themselves once again reorganizing their own life around someone else's list of needs. When you begin living for yourself, the machinery becomes visible. You start noticing. Not every request is innocent. Not every need is genuine. Not every problem is yours to solve. That shift in awareness is uncomfortable at first. Pulling back feels like doing something wrong. But for Machiavelli, the guilt is temporary. The reclaimed ground is permanent. Selfishness in this context is a misunderstood word. What Machiavelli means by it isn't indifference to others, it's ownership of your own limits. Deciding for yourself how much you give and when you stop, without feeling obligated to explain or justify either. Living for yourself teaches you to sort what's real from what's been placed on you. Some feelings are genuine, others are engineered. Some responsibilities actually belong to you, others have been quietly slid in your direction. The moment you can make that distinction, manipulation loses its grip, because manipulation requires access. A limit is a closed door. None of this makes you cold or unfeeling. It makes you precise. You know when your yes is real and when your no is necessary. That kind of clarity either sends the wrong people away or adjusts their behavior. Either way, you're no longer soft ground. The person who can be manipulated is a convenient target. Their breaking points are findable, their limits are theoretical. The person who lives selectively is not. You can predict where they stand. You cannot predict where they'll fold, because they often won't. Machiavelli would call that the psychological equivalent of armor. The person who refuses selfishness becomes an open target while trying to be good. The person who learns selfishness chooses when to be good, and for whom. That's where Machiavelli locates real power, right at the intersection of limits and clarity on the day you finally decide to choose yourself. The day you choose yourself, everything shifts. The day you choose yourself, something actually breaks, but it breaks on the inside, not the outside. Weights you've carried for years suddenly lift. Reflexes that were built around other people's expectations start to loosen. For the first time, you see not what you're supposed to do, but what you no longer want to do, and that alone is a form of power. Choosing yourself doesn't happen with an announcement. You don't post about it. You don't sit close friends down and explain it. There's no declaration, because none is needed. When a person truly chooses themselves, their behavior says it for them. You take longer to reply to messages you used to answer immediately. You look differently at invitations you used to feel compelled to accept. In situations where you used to twist yourself trying to explain, you go quiet. That silence creates space, and people don't know what to do with it. They thought they had you figured out. They assumed you were always accessible. They'd built their sense of you around your constant availability. The day you choose yourself, that assumption collapses. And when an assumption collapses, the dynamics built on top of it collapse too. According to Machiavelli, people stop evaluating whether they like you and start evaluating how to position you. Can they negotiate with you? Can they apply pressure? Can they extract concessions? The person who has chosen themselves short-circuits most of those calculations before they can even begin, because they're no longer universally available, universally adaptable, universally accessible. After this, some people leave. It can feel like loss. But Machiavelli frames it differently. It's not loss, it's filtration. People don't leave when you change. They leave when you stop being convenient. And the ones who leave are almost always the ones who were drawing from you. Your energy, your time, your patience, your willingness to absorb. The ones who stay begin to operate differently, more carefully, more honestly, more respectfully. Because they've registered where your limits are, and people think twice before pushing against limits that have proven real. The day you choose yourself, life doesn't become easier, but it becomes cleaner. What follows isn't punishment, it's testing. Every situation that comes isn't trying to destroy you, it's checking whether your position holds. And it does. You don't collapse the way you used to. You don't give yourself away at the first sign of pressure. You don't scramble to rescue everyone in the room. And every time you hold that line, something in you becomes more solid. The person who has genuinely chosen themselves isn't loud about it. They don't narrate their transformation. They don't inventory how much they've grown. There's nothing to perform because the power is in the quietness itself. It lives in the non-response, in the ability to step back, in the clean, undefended no. For Machiavelli, this is the real pivot. The person is no longer a figure in someone else's story. They are the center of their own, and the person at the center doesn't get swept along. They're what things move around, what others calibrate against, what people take into account. Life doesn't get softer after you choose yourself, but it gets more honest, more legible, less crowded. And for Machiavelli, those are the only conditions under which a person can actually survive. Not just endure, but survive, with their character intact and their position real. The game changes that day. Because you're no longer just a piece on the board. You've become part of how the board is arranged. Machiavelli's message isn't comforting. It was never meant to be. It doesn't flatter you or soften the edges. It simply tells the truth. Living for yourself isn't a character flaw. It's a survival instinct. Choosing yourself isn't arrogance. It's basic self-stewardship. Being unapologetically selfish doesn't mean causing harm. It means ending the chronic project of erasing yourself for others. Most people are running on the same false equation. The more I give, the more I'll matter. The more understanding I am, the more I'll be loved. The further I step back, the more I'll be appreciated. Machiavelli rejects every line of that. History doesn't show sacrifice being honored. It shows the people who make it being gradually normalized, then taken for granted, then forgotten. The person who is always understanding gets read as perpetually available. The person who is always giving ground gets read as having none. The world takes as much as it's given access to. That's not cruelty. It's mechanism. People test. That's what people do. Where there are no limits, testing continues. Where there's no response, it escalates. Where no one says stop, things go further. And eventually, when you finally do stop, you get treated as if you're the problem. The life you build reflects how seriously you take yourself. Put yourself second. Your life will follow suit. Keep postponing your own needs. Time will learn to postpone you. Stay vague about your own direction. You'll find yourself inside someone else's. This isn't a call to harden. Empathy isn't the enemy. Warmth isn't the problem. This is a call to stop disappearing. To exist fully rather than erode gradually. To give from a place of genuine surplus rather than quiet desperation. Because the person who dissolves themselves completely leaves nothing behind. Not even a trace. Just a space where someone useful used to be. When you choose yourself, you expect to end up alone. What actually happens is different. The crowd thins, but what remains is real. The people who were only there for the access leave, the ones who stay, the ones who respected your limits, who didn't pout when you said no, who valued your presence rather than your output. Those people remain. And those connections, smaller and quieter, are more structurally sound than anything you built on availability. Machiavelli understood something most people resist. Real loneliness isn't solitude. It's being surrounded by people and unable to be yourself. The person who chooses themselves stops performing. They meet fewer people fully, but those meetings are honest. A person with limits isn't cold, they're clear. You know where they stand, you know what they'll do. You know, crucially, what they won't. People tend to respect that clarity because limits create order. Order reduces chaos, and where chaos recedes, something like trust can finally take hold. The person who lives for everyone eventually runs out. The person who chooses themselves keeps going, and according to Machiavelli, the ones who make it aren't the ones guided by conscience alone. They're the ones who learned, before it was too late, exactly where to draw the line.